Pretending to be a lifesaver for a few pennies? We're not letting you see Sabrina anymore. Susan said this as she shoved the flowers I brought for the hospital visit into the trash can. I felt like the world was going dark before my eyes. I looked at Trevor with a glimmer of hope, but just go away. Trevor, smirking in agreement with Susan, pushed me to the limit of my patience, which I had held back until now. Gladly! I shouted, and though Susan panicked, saying, "You'll wake Sabrina!" that was none of my concern. I left the hospital room and stretched mightily. I decided to cut ties with Trevor and his wife. Just thinking about it lightened my heart. My only worry now was Sabrina's future. So I decided to act on a plan I had been considering. I'll make them regret using the child, I resolved to myself. My name is Cordelia, just an ordinary 82-year-old grandma. Soon, it will be 34 years since I married my husband Carl. It's my second marriage. My first husband passed away from illness when I was 26. My son Trevor is from my first marriage, and Carl waited to remarry me until Trevor was an adult. Trevor, often arrogant, is not what I would call smart, even with a mother's bias. Since his rebellious phase, his language has been harsh. When he first learned about Carl, then my boyfriend, he even called me names. As an adult, he has done well, joining a renowned company. Trevor, at 40, suddenly got married. Carl and I, who thought he would stay single forever, were shocked but wholeheartedly celebrated his marriage. However, his wife, my daughter-in-law Susan, looked at Carl and me with utter disdain. Ew, remarrying at that age? It's gross how you still lean on men. Plus, you're not as pretty as me. Hey, Susan, that's too rude to your future mother-in-law. But I guess I can't be helped. Mom has aged. They mocked us, and Carl was furious, nearly ready to strike them. Trevor and Susan left, ignoring my attempts to calm Carl. At the wedding, we were invited only for appearances. The event focused on Susan's parents, leaving us mostly uninvolved, serving drinks to the guests. It was then we first learned of Susan's pregnancy. Everyone, including Susan's parents, Trevor, and their friends, seemed unsurprised. Only Carl, I, and our relatives were shocked. No parent would feel good being treated like an outsider. We complained to Trevor, but he just said, "I forgot to tell you, and forgot that I forgot." Having been told that, I couldn't pursue the matter any further. Then, less than 6 months after the wedding, my granddaughter Sabrina was born. My first grandchild, and a girl at that. She was incredibly dear to me, who had only had Trevor. Susan still spewed venom whenever we met, but I stopped caring and even happily gave generous gifts for celebrations. I took care of Sabrina whenever Susan wanted to go out, teaching her how to eat and use the toilet. Having a tidy pension from retirement, along with Carl running his own business, I had plenty of money and time. But perhaps that wasn't a good thing. One day, when Carl and I finally had a day off and were about to go out, Susan dropped by. Trevor's family, having moved just a 5-minute walk from our house after the birth, often did these surprise visits. Oh, Cordelia, dressing up for once. A pearl necklace on a pig, I see. Susan, good afternoon. Criticizing someone's appearance right away isn't very polite, is it? Susan, initially annoyed by my comment, quickly plastered on a smile, as if remembering something. She then shoved her tote bag and Sabrina at me. I have an appointment and need to leave. So, Cordelia, please take care of Sabrina. But I can't today. I have plans. That's inconvenient. It's probably nothing important. Cancel it. Susan said this while checking her mobile phone, and then showed me the screen. Look, my appointment is in 20 minutes. Bye! Just a minute. Susan forced Sabrina into my arms and hurried away. I stood there, dumbfounded, holding Sabrina. Carl and I had plans to go to the theater, but had to cancel and take care of Sabrina at home. The tote bag Susan left only had milk, a feeding bottle, and a single change of clothes, so Carl and I rushed to buy diapers and other necessities. Trevor seemed to be away on his day off, hardly answering the phone. Susan finally returned home after 9 p.m. I didn't know you'd be back this late. Yeah. Keep complaining and I won't let you see Sabrina again. Susan always used Sabrina as a shield when things got tough, knowing that I would give in. She showed no interest in how Sabrina was while she was gone and immediately took her and left. Susan, why do you keep leaving Sabrina with me if you dislike me so much? I feel like I'm being used, but it's better than not being able to see Sabrina. Carl and I repeated such conversations, sighing each time. Yet I couldn't refuse to take care of Sabrina, and this continued until she reached middle school. I often wondered where Susan went, as she wasn't working, but Sabrina didn't know either, and when I asked Trevor, he just said, "She's busy, unlike you." Living like this, when Sabrina finished her high school entrance exams, Trevor and his wife visited us, unusually cheerful. However, Sabrina stood behind them with a gloomy expression, giving us a bad feeling. "We want you to pay for Sabrina's school fees." Trevor casually made the request while sipping tea. The high school Sabrina was planning to attend was private and expensive because of the specific courses she wanted to take. We never thought it would be so expensive. Turns out it was your mother who advised Sabrina on this school. You better take responsibility. Trevor and his wife said this with a smug smile, showing no signs of distress. But Sabrina, silent and looking down, radiated a heavy atmosphere. You were the ones bragging about her going to a prestigious high school. Well, yeah, but the fees are just too high. We don't even understand this field she wants to study. At this rate, she might have to drop out and get a job. I understood why Trevor and his wife were smirking. They were confident we couldn't refuse to pay. I was furious, but seeing Sabrina's state, it seemed Trevor and his wife really had no intention of paying. We'll pay for Sabrina's school fees. Typical Cordelia, always understanding. Trevor and his wife were overjoyed at my words. Beside them, Sabrina looked at us apologetically. Trevor and his wife quickly stood up. Well, that settles it. They left, leaving Sabrina behind, saying they had other matters to attend to. I turned to Sabrina, who was left behind. Don't worry about the school fees, Sabrina. Grandma and Grandpa will take care of it. Just focus on your studies. Sabrina jerked her shoulders at my words and then looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. Grandma, Grandpa, I'm sorry. Dad and Mom won't pay for it. They just keep saying I should work. I'll do my best. She started crying. Apparently, Trevor and his wife were happy she got into a prestigious private school, but changed their minds about the tuition when they saw the amount a few days later. Even the possibility of scholarships was dismissed with a stern, no debts, just work. Then, the next day, Trevor suggested we should pay, leading to today. I guess it's my fault for raising a child who relies on parents' money. I'm sorry, Sabrina. No, Grandma, it's not your fault. You always told me not to borrow or lend money. Sabrina's words warmed my heart. Since she was often left with us, it's no exaggeration to say I raised her. I taught her everything, good and bad. Sabrina, unlike Trevor's child, followed my teachings well, involving herself in student government and growing into a wonderful person. Sabrina, tell us what you really want to do. We support your dreams. Thank you, Grandma. Sabrina perked up and started eating the pancakes I made. Carl and I felt healed watching her, but we knew we had to do something about Trevor and his wife. After Sabrina started high school, Trevor called to say she was hospitalized. Rushing to the hospital, we found she was in surgery. Apparently, she was hit by a car running a red light on her way home from school. The driver was caught and being questioned. Is Sabrina okay? Fortunately, her life isn't in danger, but the upcoming surgery is expensive, and not doing it might leave her disabled. It seemed Sabrina's knee joint was damaged, potentially preventing her from engaging in sports, which she loved. The surgery could prevent the worst, but without it, her condition could slowly worsen, possibly leading to inability to walk as she aged. However, Trevor was reluctant to pay. It's just a club activity, right? She's not going pro. No need to spend $70,000 on her. She can deal with it when she's an adult. Right? She can walk for now. We don't want to dip into our retirement funds. Trevor's appalling attitude as a parent deeply disappointed me. Nothing is too much for my dear Sabrina. Carl and I decided to pay for her surgery. Trevor and his wife didn't thank us, just seemed glad they didn't have to pay. Their attire suggested they weren't short on money, but they were always stingy with Sabrina. Carl and I couldn't make sense of it and contacted someone we had been checking on. The results arrived on the day of Sabrina's surgery, and I was shocked. I headed to the hospital to confront them with it. Sabrina, I'm coming in. Cordelia, please don't come in. As I opened the door to the hospital room, I saw Trevor and his wife inside. Especially Susan seemed in a very bad mood. Susan, what's wrong? Sabrina's surgery went well, right? Yes, it did. She'll need rehabilitation, but the surgery was successful. I was relieved at her answer and handed over the bouquet I was holding. Susan took it with a look of disgust. At that moment, I thought maybe the timing was bad, but I was soon taken aback by Susan's words. Cordelia, we don't want you to be involved with us anymore. What? What do you mean? I was stunned by this sudden declaration of dissociation. Susan crossed her arms and looked at me with full displeasure. Sabrina's education is being negatively influenced by your presence, Cordelia. A bitch who remarries shouldn't be around. How can you say something so awful? But it's true, isn't it? Susan mocked me with a laugh. I was filled with disbelief. But I paid for the surgery. Don't I have the right to see Sabrina after her operation? In response to my spontaneous words, Susan's eyebrows twitched, and then she scoffed. Pretending to be a lifesaver for a few pennies? We're not letting you see Sabrina anymore. She then shoved the flowers I brought for the visit into the trash can. I felt like I was about to black out. I looked at Trevor with a glimmer of hope, but... Just get out of here! Trevor, smirking in agreement with Susan, pushed me past my limit of patience. With pleasure, I said loudly, and though Susan panicked, saying, You'll wake Sabrina! It was no concern of mine. I left the hospital room and stretched. I decided to cut ties with Trevor and his wife. Just thinking about it made my heart lighter. My only worry was Sabrina's future. I decided to act on a plan I had been considering for a while. I'll make them regret using the child. I was determined. I learned about Sabrina's discharge from the hospital through a message from her. I replied, apologizing for not being able to pick her up. Sabrina probed if her parents had said something, but I couldn't tell her the truth about her own parents and deflected. She seemed to sense something but didn't press further. Using the information I had obtained, I continued my investigation. As more shocking facts came to light, I kept gathering evidence. Finally, with all the documents ready, I approached a lawyer, and together with them, made a sudden visit to Trevor and his wife's house. What do you want, showing up unannounced? I stopped Susan, who was about to leave, and forcefully entered Trevor's house. The house was adorned with expensive paintings and sculptures, screaming of newfound wealth. This decor doesn't look like someone who's struggling with money. Ugh, well, we need to keep up appearances when acquaintances visit. It's a necessary expense. Trevor stumbled over his words, making excuses when I pointed this out. I finally understood why they had always adamantly refused to let us into their house. They were spending money for their own vanity. Even though I had read the information I possessed and understood it, seeing it in person left me shocked. Both of you, sit down! I commanded, and Trevor and his wife visibly panicked. I pretended not to notice and sat down in a chair in front of them. What's this all about suddenly? I have to leave. Me too! Trevor and Susan were reluctant to sit down, but Carl and I silently stared at them until they gave in and reluctantly sat down for the discussion. Grandma, can I join? Yes, of course. When I nodded to Sabrina, Susan became flustered. Sabrina, weren't you going out with friends? You'll be late. No, it's fine. That was a lie. Sabrina admitting to lying seemed to be something Susan had never considered. She was visibly shocked, unaware of Sabrina's lies or rebellion during her teenage years. Sabrina, how could you lie to your parents? I didn't raise you to be like that. What are you talking about, Mom? I don't remember being raised by you. Susan's face turned red, and she fell silent at Sabrina's retort, apparently unable to argue with the truth. Trevor, on the other hand, was busy with his mobile phone, acting as if he wasn't involved. Dad, Mom, I'm going to live with Grandma. I've already completed all the high school procedures. All that's left is to get your signatures. Sabrina said this firmly and placed the documents in front of Trevor and Susan. They looked at the papers with annoyance, but their faces turned pale the next moment and they looked at Sabrina. What is this, Sabrina? What kind of prank is this? Trevor exclaimed, and Sabrina began to explain with a mocking expression. I already told you. I don't remember being raised by you. I was always yelled at for no reason, and all the household chores were left to me. I was never praised or even listened to. Sabrina's words caused Trevor and his wife to panic, clearly things they didn't want us to know. Sabrina continued, pointing to the signature line on the document. Grandma and Grandpa raised me. They are my real parents, so I want that to be official on paper. Please, sign here. What? I'm the one who gave birth to you! Susan desperately clung to Sabrina, but Sabrina was cold in her response. You just gave birth, right? You never made a single meal for me, and our meals were always just store-bought. Meals alone are never tasty. Grandma made all my meals and always prepared warm, delicious ones. She accepted me, even when I was too stubborn to be honest during my rebellious phase. You never did anything for me. Susan was left speechless by Sabrina's words. I think even I would be crushed if my own child had said that to me. But Susan needed to realize how badly she had acted. Prompted by the lawyer, Susan signed the document, and Trevor followed suit. Well, it's fine. Education costs are not cheap. Thanks to this, I'll have more money to spend. Trevor's expression was strained, obviously just putting on a brave face. Susan looked like she was about to cry. Let's move on to the next topic, I said, and Susan glared at me with tearful eyes, as if I was the root cause of everything. It's about the money. What? We're not paying for Sabrina's education. You and Mom will take care of her, right? Trevor said defiantly. His comment, even from my own son, was the lowest. Trevor flinched under my glare, but didn't stop his bravado. Reluctantly, I ignored Trevor and continued the discussion. I'm not asking you to pay for Sabrina's education now. I don't expect that. But you two seem to have borrowed money from various places. What? How do you know that? Trevor and his wife turned pale with fear. I showed them the document. It listed the financial institutions and amounts they owed. Their lavish lifestyle had been sustained by debt. They were stunned into silence. We'll take care of Sabrina, but you two need to handle your own affairs. I doubt even selling this house would cover it, but good luck. No, wait! This was, for Sabrina's education! Trevor tried to justify. He must have thought if he claimed it was for Sabrina's education, I would pay off his debts too. I was disgusted by Trevor's thinking even now. Indeed, it was educational in a way. As a bad example, gambling, buying brands in bulk, and other things. Sabrina is my dear granddaughter, and I don't mind spending money for her. But your parenting is over. She's an adult now, and it's her responsibility since she's married. Don't think of getting help from us. I said this while presenting a document to Trevor, which made his face even paler. Disinheritance? Mom, are you cutting ties with me as your son? This must be a joke. I can't believe you're still joking at this point. Trevor was in disbelief, probably never imagining that I would sever our parental ties. His hand on the table was trembling. Are you serious? Of course. I want to leave my money to my precious Sabrina. Trevor took the pen with a look of despair and signed the document with a slightly distorted signature. I stored the signed document and faced Trevor and his wife. That's all from me. Oh, and one more thing. Trevor and Susan looked up, their faces asking if there was more. I barely contained my laughter and presented a document as a parting gift. You both seem to have other partners, and you should settle things properly. Especially you, Trevor. You even have an illegitimate child in elementary school, right? Take responsibility. What? An illegitimate child? What do you mean? Susan stood up, raising her voice. Trevor, pale-faced, stood up to retort. And who's this guy, Susan? You've been betraying me all this time? I don't want to hear that from a man who's been making children elsewhere. Trevor and Susan were arguing, no longer concerned about us. Apparently, they both had other partners even before getting married, too engrossed in their affairs to notice each other's infidelity. I learned this after hiring an investigator to look into their debts. In addition to their own wasteful spending, Trevor was apparently using the money for his mistress and their child's living expenses, while Susan was spending on her lover. I was furious about their actions while neglecting Sabrina and consulted with Carl. Carl was equally angry, and we proceeded with discussions about adopting Sabrina. Maybe Sabrina isn't even my child. Don't be ridiculous. If it wasn't for Sabrina, who would marry someone like you? I clapped my hands to interrupt the argument. Sabrina was trembling beside me. Carl hugged her shoulder and took her out of the room first. Susan, that's not something a mother should say. Cordelia, it's all your fault! If you hadn't said that, Sabrina would still... I was astounded by Susan's attempt to blame me. You called me a bitch, remember? A mother who's been unfaithful during her marriage is the real bitch here. What? Susan's face turned bright red, and she was speechless. I left Trevor and his wife and joined Carl and Sabrina outside. Trevor and Susan ended up not divorcing and living in a small, rundown apartment, constantly arguing. Trevor's mistress had left him for a new partner, and Susan's lover, being a host, had no use for her without money. As a result, Trevor and his wife haven't divorced, but the trust once broken seems irreparable. They are both working hard every day, but it seems they have very little money left for living expenses. Therefore, they fight every night. And because the walls are thin and the noise carries, there are constant complaints from neighbors. We began living with Sabrina and have been enjoying a smooth daily life. Sabrina is thriving in her favorite club activities at school and doing well in her studies. She was recently praised by her teacher for her work in her chosen field and is excited about an upcoming presentation. Sabrina, skilled in household tasks, helps out when I'm not feeling well, and even bakes cakes for birthdays and anniversaries. She'll make a wonderful wife one day. Sabrina often says, "Please attend my wedding as my parents." Carl's current dream is to walk Sabrina down the aisle. I look forward to that day and want to live long enough to see it.